Hey there, Samuel here. Imagine going to Apple's website planning to buy the cheapest MacBook, and about 10 minutes later, you're seriously considering buying one that costs almost twice as much. That might sound like bad self-control, but honestly, Apple planned that. Because Apple doesn't just sell products, it designs its entire lineup around something people call the Apple price ladder. And once you understand how it works, you start noticing it everywhere in Apple's lineup. The idea is pretty simple. Apple structures its products so that each step up in price feels just a little bit more expensive, but noticeably more appealing. Instead of jumping straight from cheap to expensive, customers slowly climb the lineup. And by the end, people often spend a lot more than what they originally planned. Let's use laptops as an example. You might start by looking at the MacBook Neo, which sits at the lower end of Apple's laptop lineup. It's designed to be affordable and act as an entry point into the Mac ecosystem. But then you notice that the MacBook Air is only a few $100s more, and for that extra money you get a brighter display, better performance, and better battery life. And suddenly the Air starts to feel like the smarter purchase. But the ladder doesn't stop there. Once you start upgrading storage or memory on the MacBook Air, the price gets surprisingly close to the MacBook Pro. And once you're already spending that much more money, the Pro suddenly starts to feel like the logical choice. And once you know it, you've officially climbed the ladder. And this works incredibly well because most people don't buy the cheapest option or the most expensive one. They buy the option that feels like the best value, aka it makes them feel smart. Apple carefully designs its pricing so that the best value option is usually just one step higher than where you started. But here's where things get interesting. Recently, Apple has been expanding the bottom of the ladder. We've seen this with devices like the iPhone 16 or 17e and now something like the MacBook Neo. These are clearly designed to sit at the very beginning of Apple's lineup. At first glance, it might look like Apple is just making cheaper products, but in reality, they're creating more entry points into the ecosystem, and more entry points into you spending more money. Someone who wasn't even planning to buy a MacBook might not consider something like the Neo. It is cheaper, simpler, and still feels like a real Mac. And the same thing happens with the iPhone lineup. A cheaper model like the 17e brings people into an ecosystem who might not have been considered buying an iPhone in the first place. But those devices also become the first step on the ladder. Because once someone starts comparing something like the Neo to the MacBook Air, the Air suddenly looks like a very tempting upgrade. Or comparing the 17e to the 17, you get a way better phone for just a couple $100 more. And once the MacBook Air and the 17 is on the table, the MacBook Pro and iPhone 17 Pro Max doesn't feel that far off either. So Apple ends up winning in two ways. Some people buy the cheaper product that didn't exist before, and other people start there and climb the ladder. And if you like quick tech breakdowns like this, consider subscribing. Think of it as upgrading your YouTube feed without climbing Apple's price ladder. That sounded way better in my head. I apologize. What was I thinking? The MacBook Neo also plays another important role. It competes directly with mid-range Windows laptops that used to dominate the price range. And since Apple has its grip on absolutely every single thing that the MacBook Neo has, it can optimize all of those things and give a better build quality because they're recycling a lot of aluminum. And the brand itself is extremely strong. A lot of people simply trust Apple devices more than other laptop brands. And if you already have an iPhone or an iPad, it just seems like the obvious choice. And once someone buys their first Apple device, they're now inside the ecosystem. Things like iMessage, AirDrop, iCloud, and Apple's other devices all start working together, with one main goal: to make switching away from Apple much harder later. They even have their own credit card. They're in deep. At the end of the day, Apple's lineup isn't just a list of devices. It is a carefully designed path that nudges people towards spending more money step by step. And once you notice the ladder, you start seeing it everywhere in Apple's product strategy. Now, let's be clear, it's not just Apple that does this. Samsung, Google, Microsoft, and basically every other major brand does this. It's just that Apple is more noticeable. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe. I am Samuel from Sam Nova, and tell me in the comments, did y'all notice this before? And I'll see y'all in the next one.